Well, hi, this is John Sarver, and I'm your host tonight for the Thursday evening Zoom. That's My Solar Story. That's hosted by Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. And we have some co-sponsors that I'd like to thank. The State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Homeland Solar, McNaught and McKay, Iron Ridge Racking, and Harvest Solar. And they're very helpful in kind of supporting our activities. You also can support our advocacy and education efforts by joining GLREA. You just have to go to our website, the 3 W's, glrea.org, and you'll be able to kind of see how you can kind of join up. We're a small nonprofit. Our strength is really our business and individual members. And so we don't have our second speaker yet, but our first speaker is here. You see Rob up there from Absolute Solar. I'm doing something a little different tonight because both Rob and John Barrie, who hopefully will be joining us later, made presentations over a year ago. And I asked them to come back and make kind of shorter presentations, giving us an update on their activities. Rob in Absolute Solar has been the solar installer for the Meridian Township solar arrays, which is part of our climate sustainability action plan, and also the primary way that we're trying to achieve our goal to go 100% renewable energy for electricity for township operations. John Barrie is going to talk about solar classes, a very different topic. And with that, let me pass it on to Rob. And let's hold questions until Rob is done. He's got just a few slides, and then we'll open it up to questions. Rob, why don't you go ahead and do your presentation, and why don't you give a little background about the company?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, John. I appreciate the introduction and for having me on here this evening. My name is Rob Kaercher. I'm a co-founder of Absolute Solar. We're based out of the Lansing area. Actually have been very passionate about climate change for a very long time. That's how we actually got started with business. I met my co-founder actually in the Environmental Law Society at MSU College of Law while we were pursuing our law degrees. From there, we just really made a commitment to try to taking carbon off the grid in real time, as opposed to trying to change policy from top down. That was years ago, and the rest is sort of history. And we pursue residential installs, obviously municipal, working with Meridian Township, and commercial projects as well. So really excited though to be able to share with you guys the updates on how the Meridian installations have gone, and really Meridian's been incredible as far as really leading the way or helping to lead the way in Michigan towards kind of the example of a sustainable community. So it's really been an honor to be part of that. Incredibly privileged to be able to help with that goal. I'd be happy to provide a screen share and then kind of show you guys what we've put together here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Right. So we'll start the slideshow. This here is actually the Meridian Township Service Center array below, which was a flat roof installation we completed last summer. And so here's some information on that project. So it's 142 kilowatts, and it's a ballast mounted system. And it offsets approximately 100% of the service center's use. And as you can see here from the layout, this is the array itself, and specifically mounting it in a location that would allow for building expansion on this side of the building if that does happen in the future. So that was sort of strategically laid out in that manner to allow for system expansion if needed. And this produces on average approximately 161,562 kilowatt hours a year. It consists of 355 SILFAB 400 watt PV modules with 2 Sunny tri-power core commercial inverters, 208 volt. And the total project cost for everything was $291,000. That's obviously the entire installation without a tax credit as a municipality. And the cost savings on average over the 25 years was estimated at $18,300, with a total electric bill savings over the 25 years of $875,000. Over the 25 years, the estimated environmental impact would be essentially the equivalent of removing 6,736 barrels of oil not being consumed and burned, or 74,270 trees, 2,374 acres of U.S. forest equivalent. And so as of today, and here's another example of the array, the impact as of today is 80 tons of coal or CO2, excuse me, 160,000 pounds, and has produced 103.198 megawatt hours or 103,189 kilowatt hours produced thus far. Okay, and that brings us to the fire station, which was the one of the projects that was completed the year before that. And that is a 36.48 kilowatt fixed tilt roof mount system or fixed system. And that's offsetting approximately 59% of the fire station's use, producing estimated production of 44,260 kilowatt hours a year on average. And it consists of 114 SILFAB 320 watt modules and 3 solar edge inverters, a 14.4 kilowatt and 2 9 kilowatt. And that total cost was $85,728. This one was a little bit unique roof structure as far as there's actually metal beneath the shingles. And so there's a few different things that our installation director and guys came up with to make sure it was all engineered and properly done. And so that turned out great. Love this array. I think it looks really good, really nice. And the cost savings on average, $2,202 a year on average over 25 years, with the estimated bill savings over that same period of time of $140,785. And the estimated benefits for this one, 1,706 barrels of oil. You can see here, 18,804 trees planted, or 601.12 acres of forest. And where we're at today, so that's right now we have 53.54 megawatt hours, or 53,540 kilowatt hours, and the equivalent of 62,897 pounds of CO2 saved, or 626 trees planted at this point. And there's just another great shot of this array. Really love that. And so let's see, that then takes us to the marketplace on the green. So this is the township's farmers market. Beautiful, new, fairly new facility. Oops. Let me go back. Sorry about that. And so as you can see here, if you guys haven't had a chance to check out this farmers market, if you're in the area, really cool spot. So I would highly recommend checking it out on Saturday. And actually, the Green Fair is coming up this Saturday, I believe. Be a great time to go. But as you can see, there's the array here. And this is a smaller one, so 3.84 kilowatts. This one posed some challenges in the beginning because there was no recorded use here. So we had to kind of work with a little extra with consumers to get this approved, because we didn't have any actual evidence of consumption. So that was not the easiest thing, but we got it through and approved. So everything is good. And we had to come up with an estimated consumption number, which ended up being that 58. And that was based on a lot of different factors, but obviously estimated. And the production is 4,906 kilowatt hours a year on average, $8,872. It consists of 12 SILFAB solar 320 watt modules with a 5 kilowatt inverter. And the average estimated savings over 25 years of $1,045 a year, with $34,991 over 25 years. Here, same thing with the environmental benefits. This one obviously being smaller, 205 barrels, 2,255 trees, or 72.09 acres. And then as of today, 7.38 megawatt hours produced, or 7,380 kilowatt hours. The system's created, which is the equivalent of 11,430.95 pounds of CO2 saved, or 86 trees planted. And finally, that takes us to the upcoming project that will be happening a little bit later this year, and that's the carport at the public safety building here. So that's a 41.41 kilowatt carport array. This is a high use building. It's one of the larger buildings in the township that is used 24/7. So it does create a lot of needs a lot of electricity. So this is offsetting 17% at this time. But I know that there was an HVAC update that's helped to kind of make the building more efficient. So there are some steps I think being taken with the sustainability plan in that regard. So that helps obviously. But system cost there, $98,141, producing 46,876 kilowatt hours a year on average. It consists of, or will consist of 101 410 Jinko modules with a 43.2 kilowatt central inverter, commercial 208 three-phase. And average, or the 25-year electric bill savings is estimated at 319,123, with an estimated environmental impact of 1,954 barrels of oil, 21,548 trees planted, and 688.83 acres of forest saved. So very excited this upcoming project, that we'll have completed this year. And that brings us up to speed on the arrays thus far. So I'm happy to open the floor to questions. I will stop my screen share so everybody can see each other here. All right. Looks like Mark, you have a question?
Yes. So all of these projects, would have significant savings, and I'm wondering, did you think about battery storage in these projects, especially the fire station? And if so, why didn't you move forward on batteries?
Well, I think there definitely there's certain budgetary aspects of these projects that the idea is to try to do the most with production, because in order to meet the sustainability goal, we need to obviously offset this electrical use, and so it was I think it does come down to kind of a decision between yes, batteries are great, but they come at a large cost, which then would obviously remove from the ability to create energy with an expanded PV array. And now if we were already, say, at 100% offset at the fire station and there's nowhere else to go, that would have been a different story. But obviously we were not at that 100%, more like 58, I believe. So it was kind of, I think, a choice to we need to offset as much as we possibly can. And the most efficient way to do that and to meet the sustainability goal was to put those resources into production. So unless, John, I don't know if you have anything.
Well, a number of the buildings have natural gas backup generators, which I guess have become very common. And so, it's, since you can't justify it that you need it for sustainability reasons at this point in time, at least,
right?
Resiliency, then you
resiliency, right.
You have to kind of figure out. The bigger buildings do have demand charges, and you kind of have to figure out, boy, can you, with the batteries, can you do enough shifting a load to reduce your demand charges? And, I think what's going to happen, because comes up almost for every project, is thinking ahead. Well, is the time right yet? Our battery's cheap enough?
Right.
Our demand charge is bad enough, or, but it's kind of it's a consideration. It's talked about for every project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think batteries are going to be an integral part of the future. There's no question. But generally, what we tend to recommend is, honestly, if folks are able to allow that actual kind of the market price to kind of return to reality a little bit here, and obviously we're in a hyperinflation environment as well. You combine that with a product that is a little bit behind, panels themselves and what has happened with the cost of modules. So what I've recommended to folks is that if you are able to be a bit patient with batteries, I do think, you're going to run into a situation here in the coming years where things are going to become a lot more affordable as, the market adjusts to this, especially with the coming EV boom. There's going to be so much more battery production happening. Just like, I often compare it to computers, in the 80s, how much was a computer? Very expensive, right? And then as more and more are produced, the cost comes down. You can go to Best Buy and buy a laptop now for $200, $300. I know.
So are there EV chargers on some of those buildings?
I don't believe they're there yet, John, correct? But that is, I believe, potentially part of the sustainability plan moving forward.
Yeah,
So in essence, you'll have some solar storage with that.
Yeah, what's happening, which is another factor that's kind of considered with all these different projects, is the EVs, because we just got an assessment done by Consumers Energy, which was very helpful. They kind of looked at the entire township fleet and identified about half the buildings that would be converted to EVs.
Nice.
During their normal turnover, because
Yeah.
fleet kind of turn over a certain number of vehicles every year. And so they kind of identified which vehicle would be the best candidates. And then, there's already a schedule for turning them over. So township right now with Rob's help, it's kind of dealing with the whole issue of, okay, what are we going to do with EV chargers? The township's talking about budgeting money, EV chargers. I see on the chat that Joan has a question about a companion program on the residential side, a solarized community effort. And it's funny, Joan, that you asked the question, because we do have a solarized program going. It's part of the overall GLREA effort to have solarized in various communities. And the first 4 meetings, the individuals who were doing the meetings, the solar owners, had used Rob, Absolute Solar. And so Rob and other staff have been kind of participating in these meetings. And, so far, we're not getting exactly the turnout that Ann Arbor is, but it's been going well, I think. And Rob, do you have any kind of comments about the solarized effort?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I didn't quite expect the turnout of Ann Arbor. I mean, I think just like density of population and a lot of other factors, I didn't quite expect it to be, the same total number maybe. But overall, though, I mean, there has been, we feel as if a lot of interest, a lot of people very excited about it. I think it's done a tremendous amount to help get people kind of that base amount of information and knowledge needed to really consider something like this. So, I mean, I think it's been a bit variable. Some of the workshops have had more people attend than others. But I will say I feel as if it's been quite a good success, and I think a fair amount of the folks that are moving forward with it are really excited and are planning to continue to expand their systems over time as they add things like EVs and stuff like that. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really done a wonderful job of the intended goal, which was to, get the information out there, generate the interest, allow for opportunities for people to learn about this in an open sort of forum. And so, I think we've learned from it. There's probably things we can maybe do better next year, but overall, I think it's been a great success. I think maybe we can try to come up with ways to get the word out a little more next year, or maybe possibly have maybe not as many groups, so it's combined, so there can be more energy generated, for large events or something. But I don't know, John. I think it's gone quite well. I mean, we definitely feel that way. It's been really great to meet a lot of good people, and I wish Pete could be here to share a little more, because he's been our guy who's been at each of those events. But yeah, no, I mean, overall, definitely is a success, and I'm hoping that next year can be an even bigger turnout.
And we've been talking about maybe trying to, I'm thinking we're going to have a program next year in Meridian Township, and probably target small businesses in addition to homeowners, and see if we can get them maybe participating, especially with the township experience with their municipal buildings. It's a good starting point for kind of convince our commercial building owners to kind of look at solar, because we've been doing it, the township, and are kind of showing that it's good investment. So, you know, Dave Curtis has a question in the chat. Hey, Dave, why don't you just unmute and ask directly?
Well, you really answered my question, but brought up another one, I guess. And maybe you mentioned it in your talking about each one of those installations. But my curiosity is the comparison between before the solar, the used amount, and the used amount compared to the generation after the installation.
Sure. So yeah, that was kind of what I tried to do, and sorry if it wasn't as clear as I kind of hoped, but the electrical offset percentage that provided for each one, like for the fire station, 59% estimated offset, and the production thus far, it's not been 2 years, but 53,540. And then like service center, for instance, that was estimated at 100%. And then as far as production thus far there, we're at 103,189. It's not been a year yet. So I get, I'd have to go one step further maybe to actually, look at the bills most recently to see if everything's lining up the way we expected. But, without having a copy of those bills from the township, it's hard to say. But yeah, I mean, overall though, all the systems have been doing quite well. And let's see, marketplace on the green would also be very difficult because that didn't have that preliminary consumption numbers, so that was very much an estimate. And then the carport project, we're estimating around 17%. At this point, because that is a high, very high use building. But,
hey, John, you're right on time, John.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
that is just dumb luck. I'm a
okay.
little.
Well, the energy gods are with us, I guess. That your timing is perfect because Rob just did his presentation and had a chance to answer a bunch of questions.
I apologize. I wanted to hear that.
Oh yeah, well it's recorded, so you'll be able to.
I will see it.
Yeah. Now, do you plan to do some screen sharing?
If I can.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll leave it up to my technical skills here. Let's see how it works.
Okay. John, as I mentioned earlier, is going to talk about solar classes, and
Yay!
hey,
You're seeing what
it
I'm
worked.
seeing. Everything's going well.
It worked.
Enable editing. Do I have to do that? I can't remember. Stopped as shared window is closed. That doesn't help. Okay.
We lost it.
I'll try that again. You think having done this probably 100 times to get good at it.
It was up. There it goes.
Yeah.
Now hit the
covers the
slideshow.
thing where it says slideshow. So
Yes, hit that, and then from beginning. There you go.
God, yes. Could you please,
Looking good.
tech guy? Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about teaching. I teach open classes that are about solar power and an introduction to solar power in Southeast Michigan. Am I on? I heard a little noise. Anyway, so I'm a real solar enthusiast. I've been working in the field since '95, and I've been a speaker at different conferences and things since about 1990. And I decided to put two of my skills together and start teaching open, free classes about solar power, just an introduction to solar, because I think solar is cool. And I think that other people think solar is cool if they have a chance to learn a little bit more about it. So I have a class. It's a 2-hour class right now for just open to the public. It is a class that's guaranteed to bore half of you, or this group probably more. And on the other hand, it's a little over the head of, parts of the class are over the head of the average person, and part of the class is boring to a person who knows solar well. It's a perfect blend of both. Anyway, just tell you a little bit about the class. It covers why one might want to get solar, sort of the basic background. What does it cost? What's it like to hire a contractor? That sort of thing. And so I go through the basic advantages of solar. Things you all know very well, I'm sure. I offer the class right now about once a month now that we're getting out of the COVID era. Beforehand, I'd offered it a little less than that, and then during COVID, not at all. I cover the hardware that goes into a solar power system for your house. I don't cover do-it-yourself solar, which would be a fun class to teach, but that's a completely separate topic. I'm intrigued by that myself. Most of the pictures, by the way, of people that are installing solar, I use from my work in Latin America. Most of my solar work has been in Latin America. And I just don't want people to ask me, okay, who is your solar installer? I want to be neutral on who solar installers are, so that I don't want to prejudice people, just say, hey, yeah, use the guy I used. I think that I want to enhance the business of solar in the state of Michigan. The idea is the more people that get solar, the better the world is. That's my job, is to help create more people getting solar power. I show all of my Latin American teams working on solar rather than the local ones, and then nobody bothers me about who I hire. I point people towards Project Sunroof. It's a great start. People feel very comforted by the fact that you can find your home and see the roof and get some information from that. I tell them, it is just a point of beginning. But this is, I get feedback on this, and this is a very good place to start for people. They feel very positively about it. So they get this sort of data if you haven't seen it, and I'm sure everybody's fussed around with this solar roof application from Google. The pin there is on my house, and you'll notice my house does have a pretty good solar exposure. The brighter the color, the better the solar is for you. And I did get solar power installed. I'd been living half the year in Latin America, and it just wasn't making sense until recently to get solar. So anyway, I use that as an example. And then I also tell people, buy a kilowatt or borrow mine. I have 4 of them. Go around your house and analyze your loads first. Figure out whether or not it makes sense to dump your old hot water heater. That's a funny term, hot water heater. It's a water heater. And your refrigerator. Check those appliances out. So I go through the whole idea that it's less expensive to make your house energy efficient than it is to simply try to cover all the loads of an inefficient house with solar power. And then I talk about, okay, Zillow research shows that increased property value with solar installation. Homes with solar panels sell for a bit more than homes without. So it's like, if you make an investment in solar, it's not like you're throwing your money away and then trying to live off of the interest, or locking it away for good and then living off the interest. Is that you get your money back. For some people, your house becomes more valuable, to the point where it actually becomes more. You can actually increase the value of your house more than the amount of money you spend by putting solar on your house. That's a possibility. Doesn't happen in all cases, but it's a possibility. I also teach classes with Family First Solar, which is a small solar outfit out of Ypsilanti for kids. Kids ages 8 through 18, and it's a STEM-rich class. So this is, once again, introducing solar to people that might not actually get exposed to solar until later. And so this is a solar and sustainability class. And the guy on the right there is young and hip and a role model, and the guy on the left there is trying to back him up as best he can. The kids really relate to Kojo, and I'm an old guy. But I do talk about using a kilowatt, and in this class, the kids learn about, it's a STEM class, so they learn about electricity and circuits and how to put in controls and circuits and that sort of thing. And then they build small scale solar systems. We actually do this with adults too, the solar classes. We actually, the long version of the class, we actually build a solar panel with a voltage controller and battery and standard outlet or light fixture. And then the kids get to go outside and they get to check the solar panel, and you get a 12-volt solar panel and you take it outside, and it says 19 volts on it on a sunny day. And then the question is, why does it say 19 volts, 1 and 2? 19 volts will kill your battery, and therefore you need a voltage controller. And so we go through lessons like that. And okay, I'm already out of focus. These are old glasses, but this is an out of focus picture. But we've taught to teach the class to kids and also to older people. Two of the people taking the class here are engineers already, and they enjoyed the class. They got something out of it. Here are, we teach the class in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Michigan, Detroit, and Highland Park. And that was it. I'm done. I'm going to try to unshare and answer questions. It's just, the idea is that there's classes, they're free, they're fun. And the idea is to make solar more possible for more people. Stop share. I am done. How's that, John? I stuck to 10 minutes. So questions? Okay, hands are going up. Who's the host now?
Muted, John.
I'm the host.
Charles, go ahead.
Oh, hey, John, Charles Morris.
Hey, how are you? How are you?
Great. Question, can the trade your class for, let's say, laity or non-engineers, is that enough to get them to be of use to Guatemala in your work in Guatemala?
Interesting thing. And the interesting thing is that this class is actually almost exactly the same as what we teach in Guatemala. So we have a class that's open to the public that's about general solar power. And then we also, our primary class in Guatemala is the circuits and solar class, where we teach about electricity, circuits, and solar power. And then we have them build their own small scale solar power systems. But oftentimes then they take those small scale solar power systems and go into the field and install them in a house that has no electricity.
Well, question, could someone here be of use to the, I mean, someone who's not a professional installer be of use to your work in Guatemala at all? Would there be a place for them or not? Like someone like me.
Yeah, come on down. No, honestly, we have volunteer trips. The volunteer trips to Guatemala, where we do teach solar and we offer 3 that are open to the public every year, and people come down. The cost of the trip helps cover the cost of materials that we use. So there's a price. It's interesting. We pick people up on a Saturday, we drop them off the following Sunday, and in between, we try not to overwork them.
Do you have to go on a roof?
Actually, you don't. Sometimes there's roofs that are kind of, dicey, and we don't let any volunteers on the roof. It just depends on which project we're working on.
Go ahead, Rob.
The roof anymore. My doctor told me I can't climb a ladder.
Okay, I shouldn't either. Rob, go ahead.
Sure. Well, first, I just wanted to thank you, John, for being such a great solar advocate and being there to teach people and share your knowledge of this. It's wonderful to see. I think especially, those youth classes are great. I've often thought I wish there were things like, when I was a kid that could have actually taught me about renewable energy. There just wasn't. And so I guess, I definitely would love to see classes like that expanded in different areas. I know there's only so much you can do, but that would be great to see all over the state. And then one of my questions too was if there is a website or a resource I can direct people to for these classes, whether they be in Ann Arbor, Ipsy, or anywhere else. I don't know if there's a good contact info or place I can send people.
I'm going to give you our long name of a website, and it will be up to date on this in a couple of weeks because somehow it gets jet lagged between my ideas and when things go on the site. But it's AppTechDesign to apptechdesign.org. And
I'll toss that in the chat too, so then everybody can see that.
Oh yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Perfect.
He beats me to it.
Design.org. Great.
Yes, and we'll have more information about the classes on that, and I'll make that a priority. It does not cover the classes right now.
Okay.
This is something that we're just suddenly everything's happening at Appropriate Technology Collaborative. We're just wildly busy, which is great, and this is part of it. And anyway, real popular classes.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And I don't know if I'd be happy to help give some insight into Dawn's question in the chat. If, thought on that.
Since you mentioned that, go ahead, Rob. There's a
okay. I just
question about the difference between a circus.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I know I just want to be helpful, and I'll mute myself and let other questions transpire here. But all I would say is for residential systems, until you get to really large systems that are really open and not shaded, like the service center, for instance, at Meridian, wide open, unshaded, over 100. If you're a residential system, so I'm guessing somewhere between 4 to say 12 kilowatts, maybe a little bigger, you really want to go with micros or optimizers. A string inverter system is unless they mean a string, it's a strong optimizer system or something. But if it's a pure string, then that really is only appropriate for the larger scale projects, because you need that individual panel level production. If you have, say, a cloud rolls over, you don't want the entire string to now only produce as much as the lowest producing panel. It's really going to hamstring your production over time, and you won't get panel level monitoring, which is pretty cool that people like to have.
Yes.
I just be careful about a string inverter system unless you're talking about a scale project. And that's
really we cover that. As I say, we cover a lot of turf in a short period of time, but we do cover that idea in general. But that's something to really emphasize. And I like getting the data. I mean, I like being able to look at every solar panel and see what it's producing. And why is that one 4 watts less than the one next to it? And you go up on the roof and you realize it's dirtier.
Yeah, that's the with today's technology, it's great because you can kind of see what each panel, like John is saying, is producing. You can have lots of data to look at. Go ahead, Mary, with your question.
Yeah, thanks. Hi. I'm just wondering, John, if you have done anything or know of any resources and related to workforce development with solar in terms of training installers. You mentioned your potential DIY class, but yeah, if there's any other resources.
Those are really different in my mind. The DIY class is really for people who want to solder things if you get down to that level.
Right. Gotcha.
And workforce training, we're talking with some nonprofits in Detroit that do workforce training projects. It's complicated. It's a lot of the kids and the clients that we like to work with, they need a fair amount of training to get to before they can be ready for workforce training. So We haven't got to the point where we're actually doing workforce training. I'd say that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
GLREA back in the day, early on, did a solar installer training. There really wasn't anybody else doing it.
Mhm.
And then what happened was community colleges and actually International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers started incorporating solar systems in small wind
Right.
systems training. And so I think, and Rob can kind of confirm this or not, I think, when they're hiring people, the first question is do you like getting on a roof? Second question is, do you have any background, whatever it is? Because a lot of this is on the job training, I think, by folks like Rob. But there are programs, so people can get some training at community colleges,
Right.
the unions, but and there's some classes, yes, but it's kind of, I don't know if hit and miss is the right word. Mark, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've been, I was on the Energy Commission in Ann Arbor for 6 or 7 years, and we looked at this a lot. We tried some volunteer solar programs to put solar on public buildings and on firehouses and stuff. And what we're finding is that as the solar industry is maturing, that the unions are looking towards the solar industry as a place for expanding membership. That's a nice way of putting it, I guess. All electrical would have to have an electrician, certified licensed electrician show up, and they have to be certified and approved. But there are some communities where public money has been used to help underwrite the cost of the solar system, and building trades have showed up at the work site. And I've also complained to city councils and mayors and things about, supporting non-union jobs. Training is a critical thing. John's right, at the community colleges, Oakland Community College, I think still has a program. Some union places have a program. But I think if you're looking at workforce development in solar, you really probably should think about, differentiating between, the lower level sort of manual labor parts versus the higher level electrical connection parts and things like that, or looking at working for companies that assemble solar panels, solar raw materials into panels, racking. There's lots of jobs in this industry, and solar and stuff, and putting solar on the roof and hooking it up and turning it on is the most visible part of it, but industry that's worth exploring. But
Yeah, let me ask Rob. Hey, Rob, what has been your experience with
I
hiring?
think start with looking at what jobs are going to be unionized going forward, and I would talk to the unions as well, and the community colleges that have these kinds of programs now, and how they see the industry moving forward.
Hey, Rob, have you hired anybody that actually got training and do with respect to on the job?
Sure. Yeah, to be honest, I'm a little skeptical of those that come with maybe experience at other solar companies. It's very much dependent on which solar company it is, but you come with some bad habits, cutting corners, these things. I frankly prefer to bring somebody on that has construction experience, so then we can train them our method and our quality standard and make sure that we're setting the right habits right from the start. I'd rather have somebody that is, maybe not experienced, that comes with the right attitude and that comes with maybe some of that background in construction. And so then we can make sure that we're not carrying over any bad habits from, to be honest, some of the bigger, more maybe out of state based companies that, are more kind of like capturing a certain territory and moving on. So, the reputation doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and Rob, how do you differentiate the work that's done by electricians versus
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, Mark was totally right. There is very much a difference between somebody who's moving block versus actually making your AC connection. which would need to be, a supervised apprentice program, future journeyman underneath the master electrician. So it is very much, there's kind of like electrical portion and then just like basic, put it together, move the stuff around portion, fill the trench, so it's kind of a dual sort of aspect in that regard. I know there are some, like there's like LCC as like renewable energy course. It touches on some solar stuff. So it's out there. There's like national courses that you can do online that can give you some good basics as well. But I mean, at least in Michigan, I think a lot of the core training is going to happen at the actual company, versus maybe some of the basics you would bring from outside. Hopefully that helps to a little insight into
Those large fields full of solar power are done by IEEE, engineers, and the smaller systems. I don't know if any smaller system, the 12 kilowatt and under, 20 kilowatt maybe and under, needing to be a union job. Obviously you have to get inspected and have the building inspector sign off, and I think you need to have an engineer sign off on it for smaller scale solar power systems on your home, for example. But the large scale systems are obviously, we were looking into doing a pre-apprenticeship program, and even that, getting pre-apprenticeship program means they're prepared to become an apprentice, and the level of what you need to know to become an apprentice is really high. I don't know if I could walk in there and do it myself without.
But you do need a building permit on the smaller systems, though.
electrical permit, interconnection application, so that there definitely are
Right.
hoops.
Okay, other questions folks have or comments? We've got about 10 minutes left, so questions for,
See in the chat too, another question.
revisit the inverter question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would put a string inverter system as, think of that as commercial, think of that as large scale. And then for residential, you can't either micro inverters or optimizers. They're both going to give you all the most important aspects of panel production monitoring. They're both great technology. Honestly, you can't really go wrong with either. Highly recommend staying away from a string inverter system unless you're talking about a scale wide open, mind you, installation site that is much more conducive with commercial or municipal.
Yeah,
That's great advice, by the way. That's really good advice.
Yeah, for example, I have two solar systems, and the first one was put in like 12 years ago, which has just a string inverter. And so and there is some shading, and that really affects the production because there's no optimizers, there's no micro inverters. And when Absolute Solar put in my second system, we put in some micro inverters, which are really nice. So yeah, that's the technology obviously has gotten better over time with these optimizers and micro inverters.
Right.
Mark, did you have another question, or should we move on to Julie? Julie, go ahead.
Okay, I have several questions. I'm very new to solar. Anyhow, is there any grant money for townships that's available, or any way to fund this?
Meridian Township, now who knows what's coming with this infrastructure grant? I don't, that's hard to know what's going to happen with that. But, and I'm not up to date on these infrastructure dollars coming from the federal government. But the Meridian Township has basically taken it out of our general fund. And, like other capital improvement projects, we're always looking to improve our buildings. And the fact that we had the climate plan and the goal to have 100% renewable energy for electricity meant we got going in a fairly aggressive way, because the way we're doing it, we're looking at a total of 400 kilowatts for our buildings, and we're a township, so we're pretty small, and we're about halfway there with the on-site solar. But we're also trying to reduce our electric use, like John mentioned how he tells everybody to reduce your electric use. So certainly at the township, we're trying to put in LED lights and HVAC improvements, because they're a lot more cost effective than putting in solar systems. So we're doing both simultaneously. But I'm not aware of any grants from the state or federal government. There is, for homeowners, of course, there's tax credits. And for businesses, there's tax credits. But
Plus the bonus depreciation as well, which is huge.
oh, that's a good point.
I mean, really, businesses are in the best position of any property owner to do solar, because there's extra incentives there that really are huge for businesses. So I believe that if business owners truly knew what was being left on the table, then almost every business would be pursuing solar, honestly.
Yeah.
Just a matter of not knowing really what's out there and how good it is.
Right.
This is John Freeman of
Did you-
DLREA, and I have heard from the Michigan Energy Office that they might be developing a program to try and get solar for schools. So there might be funding down the road to help reduce the cost for installing solar at schools. So I don't know if it's targeted to townships or local government. I think it's targeted for niches like systems across the state, like the school systems. So we'll keep you posted as we hear more information.
And I know there was talk at one point of nonprofit specific grants. Actually, there was a commencement ceremony at University Lutheran Church where Alyssa Slockin was there, and I actually got to talk to her for a moment. And she was talking about how she was trying to, very much pushing for these nonprofit grants.
Yeah.
Like so much other of this stuff, it apparently is just getting held up, and we don't need to open that can of worms. That's a frustrating topic, but I believe there is something out there in the works on the federal level. I hope. And part of that I thought was going to be nonprofit grants, which could apply to any nonprofit, as far as my understanding. So municipalities could apply for that as well. I just don't think it's out there at this point.
Hey, Rob, there's a question in the
Can I
chat.
ask?
There's a question in the chat about condos.
Sure,
Yeah, I know you had some experience working.
be
with-
happy to answer that.
So-
Yes, we do. We do have condo experience. It does pose challenges. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't the I guess easiest, quickest process because shared roofs. I've gone as far as actually going to HOA meetings personally to help them understand that this can happen even if you have a shared roof. I usually try to compare it to think about when, I know we don't do them anymore much, but satellite dishes is kind of a good example, right? You're going to install a satellite dish on a shared roof. That is a fixed structure that is mounted into the roof. You don't, the condo doesn't own the satellite dish. The owner does, and when the roof has to be re-roofed, you got to remove that satellite dish in order to shingle it. It's the same thing, just more connection points. That's the best way to think of it. And so we actually helped them write a new clause for their HOA at the time to make it possible so they were comfortable. But it can slow things down a bit. I think people often think that, oh, well, if all this is happening at the same place, then it must be just an easy, everything's just simple, right? Because it's all together. It's not like that. Every single install needs its own permit pack, building, electrical, interconnection. When you have condos, sometimes you have meters that are on opposite sides of the building.
Right.
You got to get the power back. So there is a more that goes into it, but it is entirely possible. The more you have a clear understanding of technically which roof belongs to which condo, the only thing really that needs to be added into a HOA agreement with that would be something that basically makes it the responsibility of the owner of the system to make sure that if they sell their condo, the next owner has that same responsibility. And that if the condo association needs to remove and replace shingles, that you have some sort of an agreement in place with the installer that will come and take those panels down and then put them back up, which we literally just did actually. And tomorrow we're putting panels back up on a condo. So we're in the midst of this right now. But it's possible. It just adds a couple steps. I will say, but more of a headache for the installer, to be frank, but it is possible.
Rob, have you had any experience with homeowners associations that have an actual legal prohibition against installing solar, and then a person within that association wants to get solar, And then they've gone to the association to try and get the agreement to be modified. Have you know any people have had experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that that I had to go to the HOA meetings with them to, and then, you know, basically be there to answer questions. And yeah, they were barred until we had to kind of do this back and forth. And then finally, you know, through a new clause, finally granted. I mean, you know, I think there's some legal gray area there as far as, you know, how they can tell you can't do necessarily. I mean, shared roof becomes, you know, kind of tricky there, but, you know, I think the only time there's been an outright inability to move forward wouldn't be when there's a historical, you know, it's like a historical neighborhood, you know, where they have like additional restrictions based on that categorization. Whereas otherwise it's usually just depends on who is on the board of that HOA. And not, the HOAs have been great. I mean, most of the time they're great. They just need to, you know what's going on, give all that information, make sure that we're getting everything approved, and it's fine. But I've been a couple, and I think it depends on who you're dealing with, to be quite honest. And yet we have done installs on rental properties. Those end up, those can be interesting, you know, depending on if there's 2 meters and you have 2 condos, and well, where's the power going? And you know, oftentimes those actually then apply for bonus depreciation, because those are technically it's a commercial asset. You're renting this property. You know, so we have several clients who rent out their property and put solar on it as an asset to add to that existing structure. So yeah, and those honestly, those aren't all that bad. It's more, I would just treat those more as a normal home for the most part.
Hey, David, you haven't had a chance to ask the question. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. The hurdles that I was thinking of were not so much technical as interpersonal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I would think that this would, for example, I'm talking about my own condo complex, and we have converted apartments. So we've got buildings with 24 units apiece, and we've got flat roofs, or you know, relatively flat roofs. They're not completely flat, but it would be impossible for any individual co-owner to do this on their own. So this would have to be something that would be done on a complex-wide basis. And then I would think that the problem would be, how do you get buy-in, popular buy-in from everybody? Some people are going to be reluctant. And so what are the legal or the interpersonal ways that you go about getting buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a shared system amongst an HOA, that is another hurdle on top of it. That would, I mean, that would be difficult. I'm not gonna lie. And I think it really would. It might be easier to just, you know, basically say, I am purchasing X number of panels out of that system, and just run power off of those panels to your meter. Honestly, that would, otherwise, you know, you're kind of running that. Well, 51% of people said yes.
Exactly.
And that, I don't know, that can definitely create some division in the neighborhood, I think. So my suggestion would be to try to see if it's possible. I mean, it depends on roof space and setbacks and all that, but if it's possible to have a purchase of a certain portion of the project, and then depending on layout, you might be able to then run that power to those individual units. Might be easier.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Well, we're up to 8:01. Is there a last question? Okay, Mark, you get your hand raised.
Yes, Rob, I just had a quick question on going back to the question you had earlier about inverters, string inverters versus micro inverters. Can you speak a little bit about having an even make an inverter decision now that they can find themselves having to buy a new inverter versus, you know, doing it now? Can you speak about that?
So I'm sorry, Mark, I'm only catching pieces of that. You were freezing. Your screen was freezing there a bit, and so I only got bits and pieces. Inverter replacement.
The inverter And what are some of the questions? You know, if I get a solar system today without one, I can't get an EV option. You know, it's an expensive add-on, but if I get an EV option, you know, EV and, you know, charger option on my inverter now, but I don't have an EV car, but I'm going to get one in 3 years. Does that make sense to pay? You know, I got to spend more.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think in general, if you are planning any future work, it's typically better to try to incorporate any electrical aspects on the front end, because you're inevitably going to be having to do some rewiring, remounting, etc. It's always possible to kind of come in on the back end, of course. But if you're trying to be cost effective, I would definitely recommend being a little bit preemptive in that regard. And you know, there's also some, you know, something to be said for wrap as much into the project total as possible under photovoltaic you know, contract, because, you know, obviously the tax credit, depending on if that applies to you or not. You know, so it's one of those things where EVs are coming. You know, you can set up an EV charger to be a smart EV charger to communicate with your system. Or, I mean, you could just do a normal EV charger. For those who are consumers, I would recommend, you know, looking into, I believe it's NL, and there's one, it's a juice box, I can't remember, but there's a credit that I would definitely recommend. Only thing with that is that those won't be a smart inverter that will communicate with the system. Most likely, I guess there might be some out there that could, but there's only certain ones that qualify for the credit. But that's fine, because you can still just have it powered by your solar system, because it's just a circuit in the house that's asking for power, you know. So but I do think EVs are definitely going to increase everybody's consumption quite a bit, and I don't think any of us or the grid are ready for that, to be quite honest. So getting ahead of it would be a good idea for everybody, honestly.
Well, thank you, Rob and John, for making these presentations.
Of course.
After
Thank you, John.
8 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap it up unless somebody has some really question they want to ask. We'll be back. We plan to be back next Thursday at 7 o'clock. So, you know, you'll get emails and postings on Facebook. Thanks to everybody for attending, and hope to see you on further Thursdays. Take care.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.